I've been with Intersections for 2 years. I worked with Bob Chase, the director of Intersections at the United Church of Christ in Cleveland prior to coming here, and when he came to New York to start this new venture, offered the chance for me to come with him. So that's how I got started. And what was so exciting about Intersections was the opportunity to really enact some of the principles of social justice that were important to me. The idea of bringing people together from diverse backgrounds to forge common ground and develop new strategies to promote justice, reconciliation, and peace. We're an interfaith organization. We're funded by the Collegiate Churches of New York, which is a Christian organization, but Intersections itself is specifically interfaith. We have a multi-faith staff, and we're involved in interfaith programming. Specifically, this year we've been focusing on promoting understanding between Muslim and non-Muslim communities. This year I traveled to Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria to meet with Iraqi refugees for the Iraqi Voices Amplification Project. The Iraqi Voices Amplification Project was designed to bring 8 artists. We brought videographers, photographers, musicians, playwrights, a marketing, advertising executive over to the Middle East to meet with Iraqi refugees, hear their stories, and then return to the U.S. to tell people about what was going on over there, where the countries where the Iraqi refugees are now living. We believe that artists can create pieces that touch people on multiple levels, whereas when you read an article in the newspaper, you might engage, on an intellectual level. The artist can really find ways to get in there and touch you in that heart space that can motivate you to action. And we just believe that the power of the arts is so widespread that it can really motivate people to get involved. When I was working with the refugees, I saw an unbelievable range of human suffering and human triumph. The refugees have been through so much, from the loss of their homes to the loss of loved ones. Many have had children kidnapped, have had husbands, wives shot by militia, have had houses bulldozed, and they've left everything they've known. They've left the neighborhoods they've grown up in, the neighbors they knew, their jobs, and moved to other countries where they'd be safe. But these countries that are hosting them, while they're doing their best, really aren't equipped to provide them with the needs that they need to restart their lives. Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria were not signatories to the 1951 Refugee Convention, so they don't recognize them as refugees. They're technically illegal migrants. So they're not eligible for residency status, they're not eligible to work, so it's a hardship for them to live there. They're basically dependent on humanitarian aid and whatever personal savings they had. So, you have people that have been through significant trauma now in small apartments with lots of people, waiting to see if they're going to get resettled, to see if things are going to stabilize in Iraq, to see if they're going to stay, and there's all this uncertainty and all this anxiety about their futures. And I think in particular the Iraqis are really worried about their children, who've been out of school for years, who have suffered a lot of trauma, who need medical attention, and these are people who were doctors, lawyers, in Iraq, and now are watching their children go uneducated for years at a time, and it's causing a lot of anxiety for them. Most of the Iraqis that we talk to are hoping for resettlement. They're hoping to go to another country, be it Sweden, the United States, Australia, and start a new life. Most people are not hopeful that Iraq will stabilize anytime soon, and they're anxious to restart their lives. They want to work again and put their kids in school. So most of them are hoping to go to another country where they can, start to rebuild. I met, when I was in the Middle East, with Sunnis, Shia, Mandean, Chaldean, Christian, secular Iraqis. Every kind of the faith was represented there. And what struck me is that there really was no difference in terms of the persecution, that all religious sects have been persecuted. The situation in Iraq is so bad that everyone is really a target at this point. And what stands out to me now when I think about it is how often I heard, before the war, before 2003, I didn't know who in my neighborhood was Shia and who was Sunni. I didn't know who was Chaldean or Mandean and who didn't believe anything. We didn't talk about these things. Iraq was secular, and then afterwards, all of a sudden it mattered, like it never mattered before, and how much people mourned the loss of the integrative neighborhoods that they had, of the friendships and the relationships they had across all different faiths, and what a tragedy. I specifically had one Iraqi say to me, you know, you destroyed my neighborhood. And I became suspicious and fearful of my neighbors when I never feared them before the invasion. And that's all based on people coming in and dividing people up into groups and saying, you know, the Shias were this and the Sunnis were this, and there's all this confusion and anger, and it's a huge loss. In terms of where the Iraqis have settled, it's most of them are living now in religious groups that are like themselves. Most of the Sunnis have fled to Jordan, most of the Christians have fled to Lebanon, in Damascus and Syria, and generally you see a lot of the Shia. However, within each of those countries, that's a generalization. When you go to Lebanon, you'll meet Shia and Sunni Muslims there as well, and the same in Jordan. You can find Christians and Shias in Jordan as well. But part of that they did because they knew that those religious traditions were based there, and they needed aid from the churches to survive, and many of them thought that they would have more access to social services, frankly, if they went to countries where there were a lot of those religious institutions there who might be willing to provide food, shelter, that sort of thing, versus feeling any sort of fear. It wasn't like they were afraid and wanted to only be with other Christians now. They just thought, well, I'm a Christian. If I go to Lebanon, there's a lot of Christians there. They might help me. I believe that the United States has a special responsibility to Iraqis because of the actions that we took in 2003 going into their country. And for me, it's not something I can ignore. As a citizen that is a member of a democracy where we elected officials that then made decisions that impact the world, I feel like we have a responsibility to the people that are impacted by those decisions. And then as a person of faith, seeing that kind of suffering in the world, I really feel called to try to respond in some way. And just as a young person coming of age in the U.S. During, this time when the war broke out, I was really involved in the anti-war movement. I protested, I tried, wrote letters to the senators, went to Washington, picketed, but none of that worked. We're still at war in Iraq, and I guess I feel like this is the natural progression of my anti-war activism, is to now be pro-refugee and pro-veteran as well, and to try to support the people that have been mostly affected by this war. Intersections is hoping to engage both the U.S. government as well as private individuals and organizations. We think that the U.S. government could go a long way in helping to resettle Iraqis. We could increase the number of Iraqis that we allow into the U.S. We could make sure that when we pull out of Iraq, all of the Iraqis who have directly worked for us, either as cooks, interpreters, drivers, are brought with us, because those will be the first targets after we leave and they're unprotected. The government could also help provide increased aid to the countries that are housing them now. And then individuals can do a lot in terms of getting involved with other organizations, such as the LIST Project, which is a nonprofit here in the U.S. that helps resettle the Iraqis. There's other organizations like Church World Service that provides aid that you can get involved with in terms of donating money or time to help people. And then lastly, we're hoping to motivate American citizens to put pressure on our government to do something. Well, the United States is the largest contributor of aid for the Iraqi refugee crisis, as we should be. Other countries are providing aid as well, but that aid has been dwindling. And in fact, in the early days of the crisis, Sweden, other countries were the first. They opened their doors to Iraqi refugees before we did. But now that's really changing. They're starting to close their doors a little bit more. Luckily, the U.S. is sort of opening our doors a little bit more. But other countries could still do more to help the refugees. Our goal for the project, now that the artist is back, is to create all of these artistic productions, to create a play. We're going to have a documentary, a photo exhibit, musical pieces, hopefully a viral marketing campaign, and to see all of these things go national, to see the play being done on college campuses across the country, to see the photo exhibit traveling to museums, to see the video being shown in schools and kids discussing, what's happening over there. That's our goal, is to really get the material out there and hope to, kind of create a group of people that are passionate about this issue.